Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Ramses the Great of Egypt in our continuing study of the history of civilization. We left off with Horemheb, the general who had made himself king and then sort of blotted out all the records of the previous several pharaohs. And he's going to be the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. He's not really from that dynasty. He's sort of an add-in at the end. But we can't make a dynasty for himself, so he's not really standalone. Now we come to the 19th dynasty with Ramses I and then Seti, but the one we really want to speak about is Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. Ramses was larger than life, at least in his own mind and at the hands of his publicity agent. He had statues of himself erected everywhere throughout Egypt. If there was already a statue there of somebody else, more often than not, Ramses would just put his name on it. And that wasn't unknown, but Ramses was really a master at that game. One of the greatest monuments, I think, is that at Abu Simbel. It is at the very southern end of the boundaries of Egypt, even modern-day Egypt. You go to Abu Simbel, and you go just a few miles further south, and now you've left Egypt and you're now in Sudan. And you have these four statues. Now one of them is wrecked in an earthquake, and we're going to talk about that in a second. They actually talked about putting it back together and fixing it, and they decided not to. They decided just to leave it the way it was. But you have these four statues. All four of them are Ramses. So it sort of reminds me a little bit of Mount Rushmore, where you have these four statues of four presidents. Imagine maybe the arrogance and the hubris that would be involved if somebody said, I want all four of those, I'm going to erase those heads, and they're going to all be of maybe your favorite president, whoever that might be. I'm not going to get into details of whom you might like. But we have these four statues around 60 plus feet tall, each one. Notice you've got some graffiti that somebody's written in. I see some what look like Latin letters and some English. There's also some Greek if you look hard enough, where that's not a new idea. These four statues and the temple itself, because there's a temple cut right into the rock, were originally, back in the 1960s, they were in danger of being flooded. They had built the Aswan Dam, and that was going to cause an artificial lake to be formed. You look down below, and you can see where, in the bottom part of our picture, where this temple and the four statues were located. They were going to be submerged by the growing lake. And so the Army Corps of Engineers came in the 1960s, and they took the entire mountain apart. They disassembled the statues, and they replaced them up above what would now be the new water line, where they are located today. And so if you go to Abu Simbel, notice there's the entrance to the temple is in the middle. There's four giant statues on the right, four more on the left, and then there's the temple. And twice a year in ancient times, at the birthday of Ramses, and also again on his coronation day, as the sun comes up, it shines through that door, and down the corridor you've got all these statues. They're all of Ramses, and this is the inner court of the temple, and through another inner court, and at the very innermost place, it's a very small place, the morning sunbeams will shine on those 2 days. And notice the sun will hit, going right to left. You have Isis, and then a statue of Ramses, and then on the other side is Osiris. But there's one more in the shadow. That's Set. You remember the god, the not nice god. He doesn't get the sun to shine upon him. That was an incredible feat of engineering, and the Army Corps of Engineers replaced it, orienting it the same day, but I'm told they missed the day by 1 day. That now I'm not sure if it's the day before or the day after, but it's not, they didn't get it quite right. They didn't get it as right as the builders that Ramses used had gotten it. Another construction area that Ramses certainly put his hands on was the Karnak Temple. Now, he's not the one who built the temple, but the temple continued to grow and develop, and he added greatly to it. Here's the great Hypostatic hall. Had a roof with these enormous columns. It was a wonderful feat of engineering. And not even sure how tall the columns are. You can see, have my wife standing there by one of the pillars. Just a wonderful feat. And then you go further and further back you go back through until you finally come to the innermost part. And of course, again, as always, there's a Holy of Holies. Another statue of Ramses, and there's at least one place where my guide was saying, now here's a statue and it's got the name of Ramses in it, but actually it was another king, and he'd specify which king that's thought to be. But Ramses, if it was standing, he wanted his name on it. Now I want to go just a couple of pharaohs after Ramses. I get to Merenptah. Significant to us because on a stela that's attributed to him, the Merenptah stela, we have the earliest written reference to the Israelites. The Egyptians would refer to them as the retinue. That was their name for Israel, and this is the first reference to that in his day. This is the 19th dynasty of Egypt. And this is long before David and Solomon. This is when the Israelites, they're in the land of Canaan, but they're just a people group that are there. You can't call the land of Canaan the land of Israel because there's a lot more people besides just Israel there at that time. Finally, as we get to the 20th dynasty, one of the pharaohs that we have there is Ramses III. No relation between the two, but he takes on that name because now it's a powerful name. And during the time of Ramses III, we have the Sea Peoples coming in. This is an invading group. We're not sure exactly where they come from. They're referred to as the Sea Peoples. They come on land and on sea. And Ramses III fights a historic, and it's historic because he writes about it. That's how a battle becomes historic. Fights this battle against them and manages to keep them out of Egypt, but he allows at least one contingent of them. To settle in Canaan, right along the coast, where they become the Philistines. Now you say, wait a minute, doesn't the book of Genesis in the days of Abraham refer to the Philistines? Well, it's a little bit like talking about the American Indians before Columbus came. They didn't call themselves American or Indians. That's a later designation, but we refer to that and you know who we're talking about. And so the same thing, a people group now who become known as the Philistines. There were people there before that, but now we have that designation Philistines used of those who were living along the coast. And we're going to see their interaction in the days of the judges of the Israelites.